By the Eternal, boys, it's the witch.
Hey guys, welcome back. If you are new here, hi, my name is Shayna, and in my little corner of the internet, we talk about spooky history of all kinds. Last week, I talked about my experience with the spook light while I put on my makeup, and if you missed it, I'll be sure to link it up here for you. Today's video is about a story that I thought was very interesting, and I first heard about it a couple years ago. When I first started researching about this story, I found out that a lot of it's kind of hearsay. I thought it was really interesting nonetheless, but I wanted to share it with you guys and see what you guys thought of it. So without further ado, let's talk about the Blair Witch. Now this story takes place over 200 years ago in 1804. John Bell and his wife Lucy, as well as 10 other families, decided to take the long journey from North Carolina to Tennessee. And they made their way to Adams, Tennessee, which at the time was called Red River, Tennessee. Moving back then was not as easy as it was today. They weren't as fortunate as we are. But once they got there, they moved into a brand new home and they started farming immediately and were very fortunate in having a ton of land to use to farm on. And John Bell became very successful and he ended up owning over 328 acres of land. And he used this, of course, for farming and some for hunting as well. Now, John was very respected in his community and he became an elder of the Red River Baptist Church. Now, one of the families that traveled with them from North Carolina to Tennessee was the Batts family. Now, Frederick Batts was injured in a farming accident and he became disabled, which a long time ago, that could have really hurt your family because they depended on the husbands and fathers to take care of the family. And so if the husband and father was disabled, there was not much they could do about it. So of course they struggled. And Frederick knew that he had to think fast and think of a way to be able to provide for his family. So he decided he was going to sell some of his land. Well, John Bell, being a farmer, he was very interested in purchasing some of Frederick's land. Now, since Frederick was desperate, John got a pretty good deal on the land. But after Frederick's wife, Kate, heard about this, she was very upset. She felt that John took advantage of them. She thought the land that John had paid for was worth way more than what John bought it for. And so she swore that the Bell family would pay for what they did. Soon after purchasing the land from Frederick, John decided he was going to buy a young slave girl from Frederick's brother, Benjamin. And yes, this was common back in the day. Very sad, but it happened. Now, since the slave girl was still pretty young, he decided that she needed to stay with her mother a little longer until she was old enough to be able to work. So he figured he'd pay for her now, and then later, whenever she's old enough, he'll come and get her. I'm not sure how old the young girl was when he first purchased her, but when she became old enough, John decided he was going to come over to Benjamin's and pick her up. Well, Benjamin said she's worth more now because she's older and able to work, so John should pay more for her. Well, John said that he'd already paid for her. He wasn't going to pay any more, so he took her home with him, and that was that. And it was after this that there was a huge family feud between the Batts and the Bell families. So Benjamin decided that he was going to file a lawsuit against John Bell for extortion. But with communication not being very good back in the day, John didn't even know that he had a lawsuit against him. So we ended up not showing up for his court hearing. And it was after this, the Batts family decided they were going to talk bad about the Bell family in their community and were going to spread rumors about them because they were very mad at them. Them doing so really caused John to lose respect in the community. Now, honestly, I don't really know who's in the wrong at this point. John purchased the land for what Frederick was asking for it, is my understanding. And then he bought the slave girl for what she was worth at the time, which again is awful, but back in the day was common. So I'm not trying to normalize this. I'm just talking like how it would be back in the day. He paid for her what she was worth at the time, according to Benjamin. They made an agreement that he would come and pick her up later. My understanding, he wasn't told that he was gonna have to pay more after picking her up. So was he really in the wrong here? Does that make sense? I'm trying to think of how they would think back in the day. You know what I mean? I don't know if John Bell was really in the wrong or not. I mean, I guess he could have paid the Batts family more since he knew they were hurting. Let me know what you guys think about this. Now, the main person that was really spreading rumors about the Bell family was Kate Batts. And a lot of people didn't really like Kate very much. Now, the reasoning for this is because she was a very strong-willed woman. I mean, she was tough. She kind of had to be because her husband was disabled. She had a lot of responsibility now. But back in the day, a strong-willed woman was really frowned upon. And so since people didn't really like her, they started to blame her for witchcraft, which was also common in the day. So if someone didn't like you, they were going to say you were a witch, which is really sad, but it happened. People would describe her as being very entitled and obnoxious. So there's that. So they were saying that since she's a witch, which there's no proof of her actually being a witch or claiming that she's a witch, but they're saying that the reason why her husband was disabled was because she was being punished for practicing witchcraft. I don't really think that's the case. I don't know if she was a witch. She very well could be, but I don't think that's why her husband was disabled. So it's just a thing that was spreading back in the day. Now the actual haunting of the Bell House starts in 1817, and it really begins with John. Now, John was out hunting on his property one day, and he came across this odd animal. He could only describe it as like a big dog that had the face of a rabbit, which if I saw something like that, I would immediately stop what I was doing and run away. And he said it was covered in black fur and was growling at him. And well, him being a hunter, his first reaction was to shoot it. So he shoots at it a few times and then runs over to where it is, and he realized it disappeared. It's gone. It's nowhere. And it was soon after that weird stuff starting to happen around the house. They claimed that they would hear what they could describe it as, which is stones being thrown against the house. And when they would hear it, John and his sons would run outside to try to find the culprit, but there was nobody there. And it was soon after that when the attacks started happening. One night, their daughter Betsy woke up to the sound of scratching on her walls. When she tried to get out of bed, her hair was tied to the bed frame. How terrifying would that be? And here's where it gets worse. So she's stuck here, okay? Her hair is tied to the bed frame, and all of a sudden, this invisible force that she can't see starts slapping her in the face. So she would try to defend herself by pulling the covers up over her face, and this force would just yank the covers down and slap her in the face some more and also strangle her. Well, John and Lucy heard Betsy screaming, so they ran to her room, and when they saw her, she was covered in these big red whelps all over her face. Poor girl. Not long after Betsy's attacks, the other kids would start experiencing things. Her two young brothers would just wake up with the red whelps on their faces. And they would also wake up to the sounds of what they could describe it as rats chewing on their bedposts, which is kind of creepy in itself. Like, if I woke up to that, I'd be getting out of bed trying to find out whatever it is, or I'd make my husband get out of bed to try to kill whatever it is that's eating at our bedpost. But yeah, now while all this was going on, John was facing his own problems in the house. He would experience paralysis on different parts of his face. His tongue would also swell up, which would make it very difficult for him to eat. Now, they knew they were being haunted, but they were scared to tell anyone about it because they didn't really know why. And back then, they believed that if you were being haunted, it's because you did something, like you were being punished for some reason. And with their reputation already kind of bad, they didn't want to make it worse by telling everyone what was going on at their house. So instead, they decided to just keep quiet, pray, and hope that it would just go away. But unfortunately, it just got worse over time. Some of the slaves that worked for the Bells claimed that they saw talking animals on their property, which is very weird. And Betsy went for a walk in one of their fields, and she saw this girl in a green dress hanging from her hands from a tree. Now, she saw the girl for a split second, and then she was gone. Now, the activity that was going on in their house got so bad that they just couldn't sleep at night. None of the family could sleep at night. They were all being tormented at this time. Now, John ended up reaching out to his good friend, James Johnson, for help. Now, James and his wife were pretty religious people, so James decided that he was gonna come to their house for a day or two and pray over the home and hope that the spirit would leave. When James got there, he started praying and he asked the spirit what its name was, and the spirit actually answered him. It said its name was Kate. Dun dun dun.
Kate Bats, is that you?
When they realized that whatever they did wasn't working, John decided that he was going to reach out to the community. He was tired. He didn't care anymore about his reputation. He just wanted everything to stop. He was ready to have some peace. I mean, can you blame him? But not long after telling his community, people just started to flock to their house because they wanted to experience what was going on for themselves. Now, the news of this haunted family got so big that Andrew Jackson himself heard about it and decided he was going to come and visit the home. Andrew Jackson took a group of his men, which at the time he wasn't president then, he was known as General Andrew Jackson. But anyways, he headed over to the Bell house to experience the crazy things that were going on there. But as they were pulling up in their wagon to the Bell house, the wheels of the wagon just stopped. There was no reason for them to have stopped. They weren't caught on anything. They just quit working. It's really weird. When this happened, General Jackson turned to the men that were with him and said,
"By the eternal, boys, it's the witch."
But that's when they heard this disembodied voice.
All right, General, let the wagon move on. I will see you again tonight.
And then the wagon started moving again. Wow. That itself would make me turn around and not go to the house. That's terrifying. I mean, to me, that sounds like a threat. Now, the plan was for them to stay at the house for a few nights so that they could make sure they experienced something. But they claimed that the hauntings were so bad that they could only stay for one night. Andrew Jackson was heard saying,
"I would rather face the entire British Army than face that house again."
"Wow, Jackson, wow." Now, as time went on, John and Lucy's health would decline fast. Lucy got sick with this really bad lung infection. Now, while Lucy was in bed, she claimed that the spirit Kate came to her bedside and took care of her. Lucy claimed that Kate would leave grapes and hazelnuts by her bedside, which did help her get better. John unfortunately did not get any better. He just continued to get worse. In the morning of December 20th of 1820, John would be found dead in his room. Now, after they found John's body, John's son came into his room. He saw this cloudy-like substance in a jar next to the bed, and he wasn't sure what that was, so he was kind of worried it was poison. He knelt down and kind of gross, but sniffed John's mouth, and he said that it was a really foul smell, and so he just knew that John was poisoned. Now, there are two stories that I've heard on how John was poisoned, both being Kate's fault. First, what I heard was that Lucy was asking the spirit Kate to help heal John because Kate helped heal Lucy. Kate made this cloudy substance appear for Lucy to give to John for medicine, and she hoped that that would heal him. And then later, after John died, she blamed it all on Kate, saying that Kate gave her poison and Lucy thought it was supposed to help John, but it poisoned him, that whole thing. And then there's another story where they asked Kate, the spirit, if she poisoned John, and she responded with a yes, that she gave him too much medicine or something that would kill him. Either way, they blamed that Kate killed John. Kate the spirit killed John. If it was Lucy that asked Kate for help, why did Lucy ask Kate for help when she could have just had a doctor come? I don't know if a doctor did come. I don't know what's going on. I'm just telling you what I researched, so there's that. But what I found really interesting was that John's death was documented as caused by a supernatural force. Now, this was the first time in human history that a spirit was blamed for a person's death. How wild is that? Soon after John died, the crazy paranormal activity just kind of stopped. And when that happened, it led people to believe that it was Kate Batts haunting them somehow and causing John's death. And when John died, she was happy and decided to leave the family alone. But not all the activity really stopped. Later on in 1821, Betsy would end up being engaged to a man named Joshua Gardner. And shortly after being engaged, she was walking through that same field and she ended up seeing the same girl hanging from the tree by her hands. And that girl talked to her this time. And she warned Betsy to not marry Joshua. She didn't give her any reason why. She just told her not to. And while Betsy was so scared by this encounter, she listened listened and called off the wedding. And we don't exactly know why, because Joshua ended up moving away, so we don't know if he was really like a bad guy or something. So just kind of weird. But can you blame her for being scared after everything she's been through? Probably just was like, okay, I'll listen to you, now leave me alone. You know what I mean? Now let's kind of talk about the theories of the hauntings. Now there are some people that believed that Kate Batts was dead at the time of the hauntings, so it was actually her spirit haunting the Bell family. But according to the census at the time, Kate was alive, so some people believe that with her being a witch, she haunted them from afar. Now people who live in that area believe that there is still a lot of activity that goes on there, and there is Bell family descendants that still live in the area, which I think is pretty cool. Now the original Bell house was torn down in 1843, and the land where the house once stood is now just farmland. People now don't believe that the Bell's farm is haunted anymore, but that the spirit moved on to a nearby cave. It's a pretty popular place to visit. It's a tourist attraction now, and it's very popular because it is supposedly very haunted. They say if you do visit the cave, you should never bring anything there, and you should never take anything from there. This one guy was visiting the cave, and he decided he was going to take a rock. 3 days after taking this simple rock from this cave, 3 terrible things happened to him. He lost his home, he lost his job, and his wife died. And how sad is that? I'm pretty sure he ended up taking the rock back because he was terrified, which I don't blame him. As you can imagine, this story has been a big inspiration for a lot of the movies that have been made. You've got The Blair Witch Project, An American Haunting, Bell Witch, The Bell Witch Legend, and The Bell Witch Haunting. I've only seen The Bell Witch Project, and it was a long time ago, like when it first came out. So I was pretty young. I don't really remember what all happened in it. I just know I was terrified after watching it. It's a very interesting story, but I feel like it could have easily been made up. The Batts family ruining the Bell family reputation could have made the Bell family retaliate by saying that Kate was a witch and she was haunting their family. I mean, why else would the spirit that was haunting the Bell family name themselves Kate? Unless the spirit itself was trying to put the blame on Kate. I know a lot of people claim to have came to visit the house, but like I said in the beginning, a lot of this is hearsay. It could have just been blown way out of proportion, you know. Nonetheless, I really thought it was a very interesting story. Whether it was true or not, I'm just really not sure if it is. I wanted to share the story and get your guys' theories and opinions and see what you guys think, and whether you feel it's a true story or if you feel it was all made up. So let me know in the comments below. And that's it for me today, guys. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next week. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like my content, and I will see you guys later. Bye!